We're not done, though. We have one last thing to go through, chat. We have one last thing, I promise you, then we'll be done with the video. And that is the shop quests. So, people have been asking this commonly on the stream, and I think it's a fair question. What should we be using resources on in order to climb to Ultimate? Or even things if you're in Ultimate, what should you be taking from it? So, from the Christmas event shop, it's simple. If you've acquired coal from doing quests in the Christmas event, save up 40 coal, get the Ultimate one. Ryo says 14 months, that's almost a year. Almost. Well, welcome, Cryo. Hope you're doing well. From the Anniversary Badge Shop quest in Episode 1, I would recommend an item called the Soul Eater. Normally, you have to do quests in PSO Story Mode to acquire. It's a partisan usable by everybody. You're about to race, well, good luck, good luck. It's a weapon usable by everybody, and it has Berserk. So it's actually extremely, extremely, extremely good. These are one of the things why I didn't list a lot of rare partisans, is that this is really easy to get if you just play like 20 minutes or so. 15 or so mid, nice. Just like 20 minutes or so during the anniversary event, you will probably get one bronze badge. And then there you go, you basically got yourself a Soul Eater. Alternatively, you can get like cosmetic things like the bunny ears, the cat ears, Choo Choo Fever, which is a completely obnoxious item. Let me show you how obnoxious it is. We'll scroll down. Just imagine walking around and this is just happening constantly. I don't know, chat. I feel like if you want to tilt other players, you just wear Choo Choo Fever everywhere. Its stats are absolute garbage. But yes, there you go. See, that got Chris. That got Chris. I knew it would. You need the Choo Choo Fever. Oh, we'll hide this. I didn't mean to put that there. Sorry about that for cutting out some of the chat. Oh yeah, it is certainly an item. It's an item that exists. There are some other cosmetic items that are in the gold badge shop. Like all of the armors, I think, in the gold badge shop have aesthetic effects to them. Like I'll just jump ahead slightly just to show. Like you can just run around on fire if you want. There are some interesting cosmetic armors if all you care about is the look of your character. It is funny running around like you're on fire all the time, I will say. So let's talk about briefly the silver badges. So remember, bronze you could get all difficulties, silver is very hard and ultimate. Silver can be traded in for materials, so if you're looking to get that head start in capping out your materials, it's an okay thing to do. You might want to save them up instead for item tickets, or save them up enough to convert into gold badges. Optionally, if you're truly done with the game and you know what red ring is, you can change the color of red ring by buying paints here. Again, that's Ephinea only. Otherwise, gold badges are amazing. They give Photon crystals, which is crazy. Hello, Etsy. Hope you're doing well. Shame we can't have a cosmetic slot. Yeah, that's a thing I think they realized later on in modern games, that people want to just have the cosmetic but not the stats. Yeah, Photon Crystal is crazy. Photon Sphere requires 99 gold badges, more or less. Well, depending on the year. Sometimes it's 95. But that's one of the best possible things. It basically adds 30% towards an attribute of an existing weapon. Truly, truly endgame stuff. Don't worry about saving up for it on your first-time character. Just know that if you're going to save up, just save up for it. So I think we mentioned Aura Frame before, so let's talk about Aura Frame again briefly. Oh, sorry, Aura Frame. It should be Aura Field. I mean, I'm not wrong, it is a frame. That one also has a decent aesthetic to it for people using a more relevant one. There's also something called the Parasitic Cell Type D, that it's cheaper to do this here than other quests. And essentially, this transforms into a super armor, which also has an aesthetic effect. We'll show the aesthetics. It'd be nice to use the cat ears. I mean, you technically could. Nothing stops you. So the virus armor is the highest defense total for non-casts. You can see casts are not allowed to use it. So if you are really struggling to survive, you get 4 parasitic cell type Ds and you combine them with Stink Frame, and you get the ultimate one. Cryo cheering bits, thank you, Cryo. So this basically means that you will be borderline unkillable if you were to get this. Its resistances are bad though. Just be warned about that. You're not immune to spells. Under the niche category, I put something called the Photon Booster. So it is really good situationally. There's something known as the Frozen Shooter that can upgrade into Snow Queen, but you have to have a really high hit percentage weapon, a Frozen Shooter, for this to matter. There's one other thing that people take as a purely niche thing. I believe it's Photon Mazer. Yes. So Photon Mazer is literally, its only purpose is people choose to attack with this to open boxes. I'm not kidding. That's its only purpose. It hits 10 targets. It's a 10 target shotgun. That's why people use it. That's it. Don't bother with damage. This weapon, the weapon damage is terrible. It's lightning based, which you think would be good, but it doesn't really scale on anything in particular. I mean, allegedly you can buff it with Yellow Merge and Gazan Merge, but just don't. Just use better weapons. I guess I'll show off the look and feel of Electro Frame. So if you want to be a Zap Rawcast, you can. Defense is also fairly high, honestly. 246 is pretty good, I will say, for a low commitment item. Platinum has literally all the top tier in the game. It has things like Sealed J-Sword, which we'll show briefly, which are like nearly impossible to get through other means. So if you want to get one of the rarest items in the game, it has a 1 in 12,000 chance of dropping on Ultimate Gaigui on Sky, and that is the only farm in the entire game you could get this from. Potentially all of these endgame 100-hour plus run stuff can be just obtained from the Platinum badge. So speaking of alternatives, if you don't want to do the 1k gambles, if you have a lot of bronze badges, I think uses bronze badges is correct here. You can just choose to random gamble for cure units, PB Create, 3 seals, and S Parts 2.01, which we all talked about earlier. It can also give you some Devil Battle, Devil Technique, and go to Invisible Guard. This is a component item for something known as the Safety Heart. So again, for whenever I'm talking about components, it usually just means that you need to be a certain level character to use them. I recommend just checking some of these. None of these are considered, I would say, like very hard mode stuff, but just be aware these exist. So if you want to get more damage by having... Oh, I'm sorry, that's not the item I'm thinking of. The Sweetheart buffs some endgame female items, specifically that are used by the Fomarl. So you'll probably see them with this combination of Giant Gun and Heart, since they combine together to give 30 accuracy towards it. It's niche. It's specific to one character if you happen to have one item and you happen to be using that as your main source of damage. That's why it's under niche. There's also Tablet, which is a mag item. It turns into... It says Gong Si, but that's not what they're called. Chat, why can't I remember them? They're the jumping zombies from Chinese folklore? My brain is blanking on them. But anyway, they have the talisman on the face. So if you want one of those... Jiangxi, okay, nice. So if you want one of those, I mean, again, rest the trigger is not the most important thing. It has the boss invincibility, 1/10 health. Probably fine. There we go. I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of those. The Hunter also allows you to get joke weapons with your badges, so check them out if you're interested. This will probably be one of the more involved ones because there are just so many things to talk about here. So Gallon Shop is like the catch-all episode 2 shop quest. You need to come here for so many items, it's like unreal. It is unreal how many items there are to talk about in this one quest. So, there are things called lucky coins, which we talked about in other quests that you can do in episode 2, see our prior videos, where if you get a coin, you can spend it to spin a roulette. There's a 3% chance of being a weapon, 30% chance of being a TP material, and it potentially has 50% hit, and if it does have 50% hit, it is probably best in slot. You will never unequip this ever, and it is just that powerful. So, you can combine hunts that give you lucky coins, that also go for rare items. Like, for example, Blue ID with Jaya can either hunt the item directly in episode 2 or try to get lucky coins from doing episode 2 quests in order to get it. They have, like, options there. So, Hunter, they get Jaya, Ranger gets Vice, but technically that's applicable to everybody. You have the Elemental ones we talked about earlier, and then we have the awful, awful, awful items that you have to get. We're gonna open these up. So there are 2 gamble-only shields that you need for a specific shield, which requires you to beat Challenge Mode, Episode 1, Challenge Mode, Episode 2, and Random Chance Gamble. If you're willing to put up with that absolute nonsense, you get one of the highest overall resistance barriers in the game. And get this, chat, its defense is like within 15 of Secret Gear. Chat, can we all be collectively mad at how BS that is? Why is this not like 195 plus defense? Why is this worse than other things that we could get for, like, I don't know, 2 hours of hunts versus all that trash? Doesn't even look that good. Like, come on. You're not even, like, glowing or anything. Whatever, chat. It also apparently generates Photon Blast at the same power level as PB Create, which I guess is decent, but I mean, come on, chat. That's so much work for so little reward. But hey, if you're looking for an uber rare, if you're one of those people, chat, this is the absolute thing for you. You gotta get through so many layers of RNG, it's unreal. Okay, so we'll talk about one additional thing. So there's something called the Monkey King Bar, which is an ultimate-only item. But I want you to be aware that you can upgrade, which is already like a decent double saber, 390 ATP. You know, it's about on par what we saw with the other items. You can upgrade it into the Black King Bar, which almost doubled the damage. And more importantly, it has Devils, unreduced. So you have a fast multi-striking weapon that can reduce health swiftly. This will probably be best in slot for some of the characters. So if you can't outright kill something in a combo, you could try to multi-hit with Black King Bar and reduce them to basically 0 HP. There you go. Just know that Gallon Shop... Okay, so let me go through one by one. There's Lucky Coins, which is the alternate currency from doing very specific quests. Then you can exchange Photon Drops. Monkey King Bar is usable by more than the other class. Yeah, that's also one thing I was gonna... That's true. So Rangers can use the Monkey King Bar, but for some reason they can't use Black King Bar, so get wrecked apparently. But one thing I want to mention is there's yet another shop in here, which is ridiculous, which is you trade Photon Drops in order to get a useful item. Please note, if you bring in, like, let's say an item is listed as 10, you need 10 to get it, and you bring in 15, the game will take 15 from you, which is brutal. That I think is cruel and messed up. So you can figure out what items it gives by slowly incrementing one Photon Drop at a time. Honestly, just look up the prices. Most of these are not like game changers. I want you to be aware of them. If you don't want to do the grind for a barrier, this is how you could get it as an alternative way, which we will check the Gallon Shop real quick. That way we have something on stream at least talking about the prices. So many things in here, chat. So yeah, for one Photon... Let me put the other one up. Hold on. We'll briefly full screen this so you can actually see it. So I'm just going to leave this on the screen for people that are interested. But basically, there's the 1 drop, 20 drop, 50 drop, 99 drop. And most of these I don't super recommend. Funny enough, I think Flower Cane might fall under niche, but I'm going to leave it off of niche because 20 Photon drops is too steep. I think unless you're playing solo and have no connection to online play. It gives, I believe, 50 MST, which is really high and has low requirement, so technically it's good for new characters. But I don't think the price is worth doing. Anyway, I think that basically covers this quest so far. 1 Photon drop for an ad slot, I think, is also a decent one to go for. But I still think if you have access to episodes... I'm not going to write it in here. I think if you have access to... Oh, I could put it here, actually. If you have access to episode 4, it's just so much faster to farm it on episode 4 in Ephinea. So believe it or not, we talked about lucky coins. There's the Photon drops you pick up randomly as you kill enemies. Then there's also Gallon tickets, which is something I don't think we've ever played with. I don't even know if Chris knows this is a thing. We'll challenge Chris to this one. So there's apparently a quest called Gallon's Plan, where depending on what you answer in that quest, you could get tickets. So the only reason people do this is to get something called the Stealth Suit. Again, these are for if you're bored. These I don't think will carry you out of the difficulty. If you want to see what it looks like, you're basically transparent. The reason people get it, other than having high evade for Estella, as we talked about before, Estella looks at evade for damage, is that it ignores the slingshot effect that occurs with the weapons. So what do I mean by that? So if you're firing weapons and mid-combo you swap weapons, or you try to swap weapons right after a combo, you could sometimes see your projectiles randomly like coming from way behind you. So like, for example, if you just swap and immediately attack, that can occur a lot. If they have question-based reward quests, something like that. So it removes that. That's the main reason people get it. There's also for people looking to basically speedrun a quest. It saves you between 5 to 7 frames every warp because it doesn't have to draw you fading out before you teleport. And that's why people take it. Is it going to be a run ender for you or a game changer? Probably not. However, there is something called Gallon Points. Because again, this quest is like so overstuffed, it's like unreal how many things are in this quest. Oh, we'll speed this up a little bit. Come on, past the vocals. Nope. We'll reset the music one more time. So I know this is going to be a long video for sure. But basically, you play really annoying mini games. I recommend if you're playing by yourself in GameCube, Turbo. Turbo, you take the button mashing mini game, you get those points, because there is a best in slot item here called Ranger Wall. What does Ranger Wall do? Well, I'll show you what you'll probably be using the entire game if you have access to this quest as a ranger. And that is making sure you get that 20 accuracy, which we talked about before. In 10 levels, you might not even get 7. So think about getting 20 accuracy worth of accuracy. Just how many levels that would be. How many levels would that earn you? So if you're in normal mode, or, well, you wouldn't do this in normal, but if you're in very hard, you could have ultimate level accuracy just by equipping this barrier. Like, just completely unfair amounts of accuracy. Its resistances are actually not even that bad. Like, 15 to 18 is fine, and honestly, defense 80 is also fine. And evasion 155, pretty good for the level. So you're going to be using this basically all the time. But sadly, even though it has a number range here, it'll only roll 70 defense, it'll only roll 145 evade. And then, chat, believe it or not, there's still more to talk about. In this quest, there's also something called the Challenge Mode Weapons, ES Weapons. I highly recommend that you go to our quest video to figure out where to go, who to talk to for these things. But if you're wondering what Photon drops are used for, aside from this exchange system to get some items, like the Photon Sphere for upgrading your items, if you complete challenge mode, you could take a challenge mode weapon that you've earned, pay, let's say, 40 Photon drops to it, and give it Berserk. Completely game-breaking. These are true endgame items, so if you feel like you can handle challenge mode, you can stop playing your character at any point on your climb to ultimate to try to do challenge mode in parallel. And then if you want to have a Hell Slicer or a Demon Mech Gun unreduced, or an Arrest Slicer or things like that unreduced, all those are pretty crazy. If you feel like showing off, there's a level 21 Jellin and Zalor that you could put on any of your characters. So if you want your Ramar to become the ultimate support force, he's never going to miss with these. So go ahead and just give him any of these and he'll kill everything in the game. So there are characters I feel that really benefit from the challenge mode weapons. I feel like the Ramar is definitely one of them, where it is like night and day if you have endgame equipment versus not endgame equipment. So keep that in mind. If you're having trouble in Ultimate and you're willing to try challenge mode, it's something you could do in parallel. Your levels don't matter. You restart at whatever fixed level you are on whatever character class you picked. So just be aware of that. So there's another quest in episode 1 that covers item tickets. There's not too much here that I'm going to draw my attention to. There's a lot of joke items. So if you're looking for goofy aesthetics, I highly, highly recommend you look at Item Present Quest. It also gives you basically every cell, every part, every heart, every spirit, every kit in the game. So if you want to make some out there mag choices, this is the quest you need to know about and go to. So we could get item tickets, I mentioned before, from the Ephinea anniversary event. I don't know how you normally get them, to be honest with you. There's very little information on them. I'm assuming they were handed out for special events originally. But one of the things you can get is something called Marina's Bag, which gives a 100% range to healing and anti. It's one of the only ways to buff the anti range in the game. Equipping it also slowly restores your HP. And interestingly, it could be used on all of the female characters that have spells. So might not be too bad. Not like the most ridiculous thing ever to acquire. That's why I put it under niche. If you're just looking to heal full screen, it's pretty good. I'm gonna change this to Pauper Carry. I was going back and forth what to call the actual item. So here's yet another Pauper Carry. So remember before we were talking about Flow Sword and Last Survivor? Flow Sword had around 300, Last Survivor had around 350. Well, if you're playing the anniversary event, it's possible within reaching very hard mode, you can end up with enough either bronze to get a silver, or just a silver playing very hard mode to get Daisy Chain. And Daisy Chain is pretty solid. This is another item that's going to carry you out of the pre-ultimate. And honestly, it's strong enough that you could cover half of the areas in ultimate pretty well. Just throwing that out there. There's also an item in here that I'm really curious about, and we'll pick up next time we go to play, called the Hammer. Chat, believe it or not, I think this is the only weapon in the game, and I would love if somebody could correct me on this. I swear I've been looking forever to see if there's any other weapons that have this. It is a sword-type weapon that doesn't have reduced targets, but is also usable by forces? I don't think I've seen anything like this. I gotta be honest with you, chat. I don't think I've seen anything like this. So we might try this out on stream later. It's not very strong, don't get me wrong. But it's interesting that we might actually see like a new animation in the game. It's very rare, if nothing else, to see this kind of animation on somebody. So I'm kind of curious, like, what does a ranger with the giant sword look like, right? Because the sword, if you think about the big swords, have almost predominantly only been hunter. And the only time you can really see some of the other animations, like there's things like Akiko's cleaver, Like, technically you could have seen it with them, but they only target 1. This is one of the few where it actually targets 10. So, I don't know. I don't know where I would rank this. It's very unusual. I don't think it's as strong as some of the other partisan weapons, but it's also just very interesting. So I'm going to put that there for chat's observation. Honestly, I would love to know if somebody ever tried the hammer versus some of the other options. And we have a classic one from the item ticket quest. It is the Sonic Knuckles. Now, chat, this is a slightly weaker alternative to Brave Knuckle, so that's why I put it as unusual. What it does offer you, though, other than Fast Cast, it adds 10 to everything, including MST. It has a fairly low attack requirement, but what makes this one kind of interesting is it has a 20% attack speed bonus. So, who knows? Maybe it's useful if you can't get God Power, but you've played the Anniversary event and would like fast attacks. Because technically this is faster than Angry Fist, so comboing would be very easy with this. I don't think overall it would be worth it. It's an interesting thing to hold on to if you're unarmed and like to do things with it. It has insane accuracy, by the way. I don't, like, why does it have 75 accuracy? Like, that alone would kind of cover the bad accuracy of forces. Like, most weapons you might have been seeing only have, like, between 25 and 40, with, like, one rare exception I think we saw today was 60. This is 75, which is really insanely high. So, I wonder if this would be more practical to use for its intended melee purpose. Compared to the other fist weapons, I don't think they'll ever be as good as the other ones for, like, Pseudo Excalibur, because they just have no grind, unfortunately. If they had like 50 grind, I would actually really consider using it more. But with no grind, I don't think it's that great. But I just figure, you know what, we'll bring this item up. It's unusual to have a 20% attack speed item, usable by everybody, and gives good stats and is high accuracy. Is it worth it? Probably not. So now we're gonna talk about a ludicrously broken quest. I've mentioned this before in our quest video. It is To the Deepest Blue MA4 venue. We're gonna talk about Girasol. Chat, if you can do episode 4, so if you can do episode 4, you have the best carry in the game. So while you can find really great items, we talked about double sabers with like 300 attack power. Move over, throw those, crumple those in a ball, throw them out. This weapon is broken. It is 550 attack, so if you don't want to have the fast cast of the Angry Fist for Volt Up, it's a solid option to hold. Females have really fast animations with this, so Hugh Casil in particular, and the Faux Marl, have really fast animations with this, and they cleave everything. Its ATP requirement is high, but not impossible. Like, 600 is not reasonable. 550 is still really high, but probably doable if you've been feeding your mags consistently. More importantly, the raw ATP of this means, like, if you are at 555 minimum to use it, and you equip it, you double your ATP. And it has decent accuracy. 50 ATA is not low either, comparatively. Again, most weapons we saw were between 30 and 50. This is on the upper end of the items that we saw. So really fantastic item. It also has an ability to drain health by doing a 360 piercing special. That's why it tells you to see page. People don't use it for the damage. People use it to actually drain their health to they basically get low enough to trigger mag if you get hit again. So people will use this as a conditional way of lowering health for that. But yeah, it's a completely unfair and broken item, chat. Like, honestly, so not only was episode 4 giving you all those rares, but you could be doing quests that give you the tickets needed for M4A to then redeem them for a weapon that will carry you all the way to the end of Ultimate, guaranteed. You could use this on everything in the game. Respectably high damage. It's better than most rares. Fantastic. It even gives you 2 MST for no reason. Why does it give you 2 MST? I have no idea. Why only 2 at this point? But anyway, so remember how I was talking about before how the 1k gambles are amazing? Well, imagine if you're playing episode 4. Let's say hypothetically you clear just 3 quests on very hard mode. Just 3. Or even just, well, let's say 5 on hard mode, 3 on very hard. One of the rewards for handing in the tickets is 200,000 Meseta. So this is almost a guaranteed 3 seal. This is almost a guaranteed, you know, god power, everything else. Clearing just potentially 5 or less quests could result in the good prize. It's not guaranteed, don't get me wrong. But we've been in scenarios. In fact, we've streamed scenarios where people within, I don't know, chat, what would you say? About an hour and a half of episode 4 runs, we cashed this in, and within 2 tries, somebody got the 200,000 Meseta. In fact, I think I was the only person that didn't get it, if I remember correctly, and I didn't get Girasol. I remember I could not get the reward I was looking for. But the 200,000 Meseta is repeatable for the quest. Unfortunately, Girasol is once per character. Yeah, so we know it's not the most, it's not the worst odds. It's like a, let's see, what are the odds specifically? Let's not make up numbers here. Oh, game, come on. I know I typed it incorrectly. Get out of here. Yeah, whatever. So it's 11% odds. Let me just briefly flash it on screen again. I think we talked about this before in the quest video. We're gonna briefly put this on screen for people that haven't seen it before. So, you know, it's gonna take a while, potentially, but you could get all these grinders, you can get all the power materials you need, you could get HP and TP material. TP material is the only ways to get it. Samurai armor, if you've got those Agitos, you could technically 7% chance luck into the grand prize and get a huge bonus. So you have to get the samurai armor, I think, first. So I think that's it. And then they just turn into Photon drops later, which is good because Photon drops are in-game currency. Anyway, just wanted to point those out to people that haven't seen it before. Absolutely fantastic. Now we're going to come into the egg shop for Easter. So these have some of the craziest power upgrades you can have in Ephinea. Honestly, the amount of things you could get for I think it's 15 accuracy. Let me double check later. I'll correct it if this is wrong. Actually, I think I did god armor earlier. Yeah, it is 15 ATA. See that? I trusted my instincts even though I don't use that item anymore. The 1A gambles are one of the most powerful gambles you can get in the game. I think they're even stronger than the 1K gambles, to be honest with you. So we already talked about, we haven't even talked about this yet. So we still haven't even covered photon crystals. They're their own broken mess. So reminder again, you can get photon crystals in episode 4 and 1A gambles and the bad shop. Keep that in mind for now. But get this, chat. Remember how we were talking about God Battle, how hard it was to get in very hard mode and hard mode? Well, for 1 egg, you could just Heavenly Battle, which is 40% attack speed, which is twice as good as God Battle. And in fact, in the 1K gamble, or not 1K, in the 1 egg gamble, one of the alternates is God Battle. So you have 2 different chances of getting a really good battle unit. And then we were talking a little bit before about the V5 unit, about something that increases your chance of it triggering. So what I would recommend, let me move this over slightly. So what I would recommend is that if you do a 1A gamble, you can get all these fantastic, literally good on almost every character level items. Like even God Power is fantastic. But if you get a V501, you're basically set for the game. This is one of the best units in the game, only topped by its upgrade V502. So what does it do? So remember before we were looking at 80%, 90% chance of success on things like the higher end of kill moves, like the insta-kill, health series, paralysis, confuse, and freeze chance. Well, add another 50%. Actually, that's not quite right. I'm gonna say 1.5 times might be more accurate. I think that might be a little less misleading. I'm gonna be careful, because people might think I'm referencing, you're literally adding 50%. That's not true. You're adding 50% of the total, which is huge. It's more important in ultimate mode, I would say, to get that bonus, since casts get an innate bonus towards it. In fact, let's see how they word it on the site. I'll just mirror whatever they did there. Boost by 50%. Yeah, so just be aware it's calculated in the formula for 50% of... It's not literally 50%, but potentially could be more, could be less. It all just depends. So, we're gonna save that for now. So this means that if an enemy on average has less... And honestly, this is true. Most enemies have less than 30% resistance prior to ultimate to specials. Adding 50% of your bonus when it's already 80% means that you basically ignore their resistances and you have 100% to like 80% chance of landing specials for every enemy in the game, which is fantastic. And that helps you clear things like episode 2, where things might have low dark resistance, or enemies with possibly as low as 20% like status resistance are completely ignored by your big bonuses. So hey, definitely makes those weapon specials more consistent. So these are all the things you could get just for 1 egg. And you can also get Flow and Shield for some reason. I don't really know why, but you can. Because, you know, chat, just win harder. Just win harder, chat. If you want a rest emerge, you could get it here. Okay, now here's where the crazy thing comes in. Eggs are really easy to get, just kill any enemy. And believe it or not, chat, in the 5-egg gamble, there's Spread Needle, and people who played Rangers probably know that this is one of the best weapons in the game, if not arguably the best weapon in the game. It is a fast-firing shotgun that uses rifle animations, has one of the best specials in the game, has really fast attack speed, and is just absolutely ludicrously broken. Combine Spread Needle with Heavenly Battle, and you can legitimately stun lock most enemies in the game with just normal attacks. Enemies can no longer reach you, enemies can no longer attack you, it is over. GG. This is a literal ultimate level game altering weapon. It is one of the best, if not the best guns in the game. I could see people arguing for challenge mode weapons being slightly more broken, but if you want a weapon that is just fantastic and scales off of so many different things, this is your dream that you get the Spread Needle on this. If you get this, it's also not even a high ATA. Like 135 ATA is like nothing. Most max accuracy for like Rangers, by the way, is above 200. To give you an idea, so like, yes, for forces, their max is like 163, I think, at the lowest, and that's still pretty high up there. But when you're a Ranger with Ranger Wall and God Arms that are Heavenly Arms, nothing. That is nothing to reach. I mean, like, what, 4 Heavenly or 3 Heavenly Arms would mean that you're 75 ATA, so you would only need, what is this, 60 attack accuracy? So yeah, you're gonna have that by level 80. I'm just saying, chat, you're going to have it with those kinds of things. Then we're going to get to a fantastically wonderful hard carry Hunter armor that sadly I can't include in our normal list, but I will put it here for chat to be aware. This is not reasonable to attain and use prior to ultimate. However, it does many things. One, very mediocre resistances. Defense is fine, evade is okay. What it does though, it permanently gives you 40% attack speed. So now you've freed up a unit on your character that no longer has to be dedicated to Heavenly Battle. If you want more resistances, if you want more accuracy, if you want to do oops all Heavenly Arms, it's all possible now. On top of that, so on top of just being amazing, it saves you a slot. So by definition, that makes it one of the best armors in the game. It also combines with several of the Ooh, we haven't even talked about these yet. But it combines with several weapons that you can get technically in normal and very hard if you're playing Black Paper Deal, which I promise we will get to. It's in episode 4. So let's take a look at some of the items that it can apply to. So it adds 100 attack weapon, or 100 weapon ATP is what I meant to say, and 10 accuracy. So we can see that this is a really strong single sword. Oops, it's now 650 attack with 650 ATP, so you're doubling your damage. So that's already pretty good. Then we look at its counterparts. So there's Sange and Yasha. So again, that's 650, amazing. Then there's Kamui, which again is 650 by default, but is now 750 with 55 accuracy, ridiculous. Then there's the sword that we're going to be building towards at some point in the future, which is Sange and Yasha, which requires you to hold, as you would guess, Sange and Yasha together by being a hunter that's at least level 100 and has 800 ATP. And this grants it another 100 ATP, so it does 750 ATP, which is the highest weapon damage we've seen so far in our discussions. And it's a twin sword, which means it strikes really often, and we have full control over its stats to level up. So it's already really good, and it buffs a mostly used by hunter item. So just overall fantastic. Too bad it requires level 150 to use. That's literally the only thing holding it back from being usable early. And also, chat, believe it or not, in the 5-egg gambles, there's the V801, which we didn't talk about yet. So if you look at this, it's pretty innocuous. It just says 5 MST. And you're like, Ziggy, why are we listing something that only gives 5 MST? You show me Heavenly Mind, that's 45. So what the game doesn't tell you, because the game loves to not tell you these things, is that if you are using a technique, I believe it's the startup of the casting animation is reduced. So this will allow for legit spell stun locks on some difficulties. If you're an unarmed male force with V801, you could stun lock basically everything, and solo play is really, really, really easy. This is a game-changing rare for male forces. It's pretty good for females. It helps some of the slowness where they don't quite stun enemies. So if they're point blank, for example, and you're casting a Rafoi repeatedly, usually the female will get hit on the second cast at point blank. For males, you will no longer get hit. You could legit just Rafoi, 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 Rafoi until everything dies. So what a fantastic item. And speaking of fantastic items in the 5-egg gamble, you can end up with a Heavenly HP, which grants 100 HP to you. So if you're having trouble surviving bosses, if you're a faux New World with her awful, awful health total, guess what? You just got 100 HP, which was like 20-something levels of HP. Then this is a consolation prize. Think about how good this is that I'm saying this is a consolation prize. You can pick up Centurion ability, which is 3 to accuracy and 30 to every stat. Bonkers. You can pick up Jaya, which may or may not come with hit percentage. Bonkers. Disca of Brave Man, one of the best Discas in the game. Bonkers. Halloween Cookie, which unlocks one of the best series of quests in the game. Bonkers. Deep Hearts V101, one of the best armors prior to basically the end of the game. Let me double check. Is that armor or shield? Oh, it is a frame. Oh. I'm gonna say for offense. I thought it was a shield, I think, when I wrote the description. Then you get a fantastic weapon that is, again, borderline probably not usable in very hard mode without getting a lot of materials or mag leveling, but it's the Red Sword. This is probably my favorite weapon in the game and one of the few swords you will see me use a lot on stream, depending on the character. So it has really decent ATP, up to 600 potential damage. You can add 52 to grind, meaning the minimum damage is good. It also has an unreduced seize. So if you combine that with the V501 we saw earlier, this is one of the ways hunters can crowd control entire rooms by just locking them down. So I could normal, special, land my hit, laugh at them, and lock down a whole room. You could use it for its damage. It's not the intended purpose of the weapon, but it's good enough that if you were to somehow wield this in very hard, or normal, well, definitely normal, that this will carry you through basically all of Ultimate. I think this will get you further than like a Flow and Sword or a Last Survivor. But obviously it has a dependency on the Easter events, and you also have to be on the Ephinea server, so that's not as likely to occur. We talked a little bit about Safety Heart before. We looked at Kamui briefly. Reminder, this was Safety Heart with the gun and such. It gives you cosmetics. I guess we'll show the Pioneer parts and Yahoo engine while we're here, as I named them. If you want a little Regol ship floating around you, you can. Or if you really want to bring back old times, you can have a mag that has Yahoo on its back. So if you're willing... Okay, so if you end up with an abundance of eggs, which I will say is not as likely. I will say it is... If you play, on average, let's say 4 hours, at most, let's say twice or maybe even 3 times during the event, you'll probably end up with 20 to 30 eggs. So you can make a few really good 5-egg gambles, or you can make several 1-egg gambles, and you'll be set. You'll have everything you need for Ultimate at that point, more or less, and you're good to go. Now, if you're playing and this is not your first character, but you're looking for some power, we get all the best units in the game. The 10-egg gamble is like the gamble slots of the gods. V502, best in slot, doubling the chance of insta-kill makes episode 2 tolerable. Since most enemies have a weakness to dark there. We have V101, we already mentioned, is one of the best units in the game. Not only does it give it attack accuracy and 50 to all other stats, 40% attack speed. It can even just give you a Photon Sphere, which is worth 99 Photon drops, which saves you a lot of time. You also get something called Swordsman Lore, which again is a normally ultimate level only item, but again, technically you could go get this in normal if you just happen to get lucky on the 10-egg gamble. And it turns into something called Proof of Swords Saint if you kill 20,000 enemies with the other thing equipped, which is pretty crazy. And basically this is one of the only units in the game that is class specific, so I wanted to draw attention to that. So it gives 30 accuracy and 60 EVP, but it reduces defense, and I believe it lets you go over the cap. So what we're gonna do, I'm gonna go minimize my notes for a second just so that you can view this in full screen. Okay, 1 second. We're just gonna go through quickly here. So, let's talk about relevant weapons that it buffs. Excalibur busted, for people that haven't seen Excalibur before. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not 800 ATP is the requirement. I'm sorry, it's 900 base attack power. What an absolutely broken weapon with Pierce. So by the way, have fun hunting for that in the future. 2 Kamui we mentioned before. We mentioned some of the Yasha Sasha. Well, even Musashi, we mentioned Musashi earlier. Yamato. It covers most of the good katanas and twin swords. So just be aware, it's not every single weapon combo. Definitely take a look. It takes a very long time to unseal. I talked about unsealing on a previous video. I won't go over that here. But just be aware. Really, really powerful. It's even better than Heavenly Arms because it lets you go over your normal cap. Crazy. There's almost nothing in the game that lets you go over a cap like that. So we'll go briefly to something called Syncesta, which by itself doesn't really do anything. Essentially just lets you rotate between some powerful Lavis items. So most people, I believe, do... Is it Lavis Cannon? Yeah, people use Lavis Cannon. So I will briefly talk about a very niche item that is not relevant for leveling, but for why people might pay Photon drops for this, just so chat is aware, is that you basically could drain your health in order to deal damage, and people use the drain health effect to keep low on health for mag triggers. So, good component item, I'm not going to call it game-changing. Something that I will call borderline game-changing is something called the limiter. So by default, when we look at it, you're like, why is this a game changer? It is minus to all these stats and it's terrible. Well, if you manage to get 20,000 kills with this equipped, which again, will take a while, I recommend doing normal, etc, etc. Then you end up with an adept that gives 10 to everything, except it gives 20 to attack accuracy. So it's slightly weaker in terms of Heavenly Arm accuracy by 5 points. However, it gives 6 to all resist, and it cuts the price of technique usage by 25%, and that includes if you're using the Spirit Special from weapons. So this can end up being a meta choice for hunters, even if you don't have a lot of... I would say don't have a lot of TP. Like the casts might use it because again, it's a 20 ATA that gives 6 to all resistances. Humar and Hunural might use it for Spirit Special cost reduction. Bomars and other kinds of forces are more likely to use it for the technique down costs, but technically they can still use it. So really, really good. Not necessarily best in slot, but it's a really great upgrade to God Arm. And once you start getting towards the tail end of leveling a character where you're going to hit your natural accuracy cap anyway, this just ends up being better than Heavenly Arms towards the end of the game because it just gives you so much more on one item. But while leveling, Heavenly Arms might be better. I think we talked about everything here except for Photon Filter. I'm going to skip ahead slightly. Oh, there's one more thing we have to talk about, sorry. So Photon Filter lets you change the color of the weapon. It goes through a cycle. Briefly put the full screen up. So yeah, it'll go through the different colors. So people want to see what weapon color they can make their weapon. It's just purely for aesthetics. Me, I don't really care, but for people that are interested in it, for sure, this is one of the only ways to change the weapon color in the game. Liberta Kit is just another way to get a mag. Now, one thing I forgot to talk about was the Magic Rock Heart Key. This is normally a very expensive thing to get. It requires 50 photon drops per use. But it is really, 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 really good if you could get this. So what does it do? The one I would recommend, I mean, you could technically all of these are situationally good, but the one that I would recommend for forces, and I think this one is actually meta, is a 1 with 800 MST requirement. So again, something you're probably not going to get in very hard mode, but it gives a 30% bonus to Gafoi, Gazond, and Gabarda, but Gabarda is terrible. More importantly, Gafoi, Gazond are some of the most used techniques outside of Rabarda, Rafoi, and maybe the buff spells. So fantastic item for bosses, highly recommend. The other ones are more situational. Safety Heart we looked at before. Love Heart I don't think we talked about. This is the one I confused which one it was. We'll look at the aesthetics briefly. But essentially what can happen is that if a lot of male characters are around the female character holding this, it improves their attack damage by a lot. Oh, I'm sorry, no. This one increases defense. My bad. I keep forgetting, there's so many ones. Sweetheart is the one I'm thinking of that increases attack damage. They have the same mostly same visual effect, which is why I was confused. So anyway, this one's like very niche. It's technically useful on Volt Op, for example. Like if the Foe Marl is the one stun-locking the boss, all the male characters can just run up to her and buff the damage, so that way she can one-cycle easier. And also, technically, if both characters are near each other to fight, for example, like Falls, if both players are on the same side of the arena, it's just free damage, and it makes the Foe Marl much better at clears, for example. It's still useful on Hunters for the same reason. It's just... it's not as likely if you're a hunter that you'll be lined up with other characters necessarily, where the force you can choose when to line up with other people more easily. With a ranger, you could choose whether to line up with them. So there's also Ellie's Shop, which you could trade in eggs for things like TP materials or materials in general. Get your item ticket if you want to go to the item present quest. And again, you have another... oh, I put 3 O's there. You have another chance of getting bunny ears, cat ears, and a heart item for different characters. I do want to point out that there are several weapons you could get from Karen. She gives you type weapons, so what does type mean? So if you look at the beginning, it says type NME, so that means type machine gun, but it looks like, and in this case it's a machine gun, which is kind of boring, But technically, you could have, like, other types of weapons look like other things. That's basically the gimmick of it. However, what's interesting about this one, for the Type ME mech gun, let me see if I can load this one up specifically. Is that, one, you saw that the mech guns normally have a terrible damage range, like 5 to 8 or like 15 to 25. This allows a grind of 30. Yeah, Chris gives another example. This one has a grind of 30. So this is technically one of the more damaging machine guns in the game. Technically. And it usually has somewhere between 30 and 40% hit, depending on if you got it from an event versus the shop. This is also not a bad way of getting an easy hit one. So the higher ATP makes a difference, because charge doing like triple damage is, you know, getting another, I don't know, 60 damage per shot is kind of crazy, as you can imagine. So sometimes the ATP matters. So you might see Rangers use this just for more raw power versus their Hunter counterparts. And I want to give a shout out to DS Wand for one specific reason. I end up using this every time I make a new character. Oh, I'm making the wiki work overtime. You could do it, wiki. We're almost at episode 4. I promise. We're almost done. I promise. I promise to you it will load. Jeez. I think the site is down or something. Oh, there it goes. So it has the double saber animation, which is cute, but it doesn't really do that much damage. What is nice, well, I guess if you want a double saber with 140 attack power, it's okay. But more importantly, really low MST requirement, 50 MST. I find when I'm making a new character, I always equip this to get that easy MST buff. Because think of it this way. For a blank character with a mind mag with 150 mind, I get 300 MST just from the mag. I need to somehow get 50 between my character levels and units, which is very easy. So this just ends up being a free 50 MST for learning techniques. So I thought I'd give a special shout out for this. This is post-commentary Ziggy here. So there were a couple items I didn't realize were on the initial list, so I went back and added them to the shop for the Easter event. So I'm going to start off with one known as the Type SH, or Shot, as in it is a shotgun animation, aka the type is shotgun, SH, but it looks like a shotgun. So what this gives is, if you select this in the Easter shop, you can get any of the 3 specials. Commonly you'll see Berserker Charge, taken from the shop. And I want to talk about something, just one additional point here. So let me scroll so that everybody can see it a little easier. So Ranger only, not a huge ATA requirement. In fact, under 100 is fairly reasonable even for lower difficulty. You might notice the base ATP is very low, only 10. It does grind up to 60 though, with an accuracy of 40. So what I want to do to compare against other weapons of the same type, I'm going to go ahead and just do a quick search on the arms as a comparison. So this is what you would normally see a lot of in Ultimate comparatively. Let me scroll a little further down so you can see some of the number of comparisons for arms. So you can see it has slightly boosted initial accuracy. You have an accuracy of 40. This will always come with, I believe, 40% hit. The way it works out, I will just state more clearly, is that it's only off by 3 accuracy from a 50 hit version of a very common ultimate kind of drop. So no downside of evasion. If you compare the grind and the minimum ATP, we can see that they are essentially equivalent to the minimum score. However, according to this, it says it's more powerful than an arms. I don't fully get the description on the wiki. I'm going to be honest with you. If I'm misunderstanding something, I would love corrections within the guide for future reference. But from my understanding, you take the max grind and add it to the ATP. So even if I look at both of these, they should be about equivalent. So from the standpoint of it, I will put it there. Yeah, I'm gonna say citation needed, I think, in our other one. I feel like this is said, but I don't think mechanically this makes sense. So I'm just gonna put a note in the notes. But what's more important to know is you could get basically an endgame shotgun as long as you pick up some grinders, and it is a fairly easy clear. And unlike some of the other methods you can use to get a 50-hit charge arm, as an example, this one is just guaranteed. So some people might just find this easier to do, and I don't blame them. So potentially consider this if you have the spare grinders, and again, are looking to use some of the Easter eggs in a way that would benefit your character. Definitely consider this option. So there's one more weapon I want to talk about in more detail. I totally forgot about this weapon. And that is the Type SW/J sword. So thank you again for Helpcleave for reminding me about this weapon. I literally only got it very recently on stream. I never got to enjoy this leveling up, but looking at the grind potential mixed with the minimum ATP and the effective ATP on attacks, this is actually stronger than things such as the Soul Scythe that you could use as a partisan, for example, from other quests mentioned within this quest guide. And more importantly, every character class can use this. So fairly strong. You'll get it with Spirit from the Easter event. And it's another 10 target, decently high accuracy. It only comes with, I think, 30% hit by default. So it's not the highest possible accuracy you could achieve, but this is more than good enough to carry you to Ultimate. In fact, some people will probably still use this in most of Ultimate, given the fact that this is a potential unique animation that other classes have access to. And speaking of unique animations, I'm going to include it here for the sake of combining all information. So while there are other options in the shop, for example, there are claws and stuff you can get in there, one thing that this is predominantly used for is something known as ledge dropping. So we didn't talk about this in the initial guide. I'm backing up. I will retroactively add it to the upper section with the different items. But the best way to describe it is essentially there is a platform within episode 2 that if you do a certain attack at a certain angle on the platform, you could skip off of this platform and potentially avoid large portions of Seabed Dungeon. So this is more of an advanced tech. I highly recommend you check out the link that is included both in this guide and on screen right now for the initial thread for the multi-level room within Seabed. But this initial sword animation only requires one swing for females to go into the next area, so I usually see this in a non-damage sense to actually do some advanced movement tech within episode 2. I'm also just going to leave on screen the different types of animations that you can use in order to perform this trick. So even if weapons aren't quote-unquote meta for damage, they might actually be niche or, we'll say, technically required for efficient seabed runs in episode 2. So I think predominantly this weapon is fairly easy to attain, and it's one of the few first attack animation ones that are available. The other being a katana with the foam katana with the Huka seal, and twin sword with the female. Otherwise, there's not really a male option that goes through with one hit. People will often bring one of the many Agitos that we mentioned throughout this particular guide to clip through, since it gives you 2 chances to do so, so some people might find that a little easier. Or sometimes they'll bring in a claw type weapon just because claw animation is fairly quick. So just things to consider. There are off-meta reasons, well, not off-meta, we're going to say unintended usage of weapons. So if you're looking to advance your game a little bit, specifically for episode 2, who knows, maybe this information will be useful to you. I think for first-timers, this probably won't be as applicable, but you'll probably appreciate this if you decide to dive deep into episode 2 over and over. In particular, if you're looking to save some time on some of the longer runs within episode 2. With that, we're going to return back to the video. Okay, we're finally at one of the last quests in the game. Here we go, episode 4. The one that is absolutely game-breakingly dumb. But we're going to start with weaker items first. So there's something called Black Paper Deals 1. You pick an enemy route, and that will determine what things you can get. There's something called the Tripolic Shield. which is not bad. I recommend the Reflector more, sadly. You can pick it up if you want to. Honestly, the early stuff is all kind of mediocre. I don't recommend most of these runs. However, if you fight the zoos on normal, so keep in mind, this is a quest you could do on normal for 1 Photon Crystal. Not really hard stuff to do if you're in very hard mode. You could get one of the best double sabers in the game, so way better than anything you can hunt. Accuracy pretty high. Only usable by females, but Fomarl and Hucasil in particular are absolute monsters with this weapon. It is fantastic. Easy carry. What I might end up doing, since I have atrocious luck, is there's a very niche weapon that makes it easy for the hunter. So I promised you there's an item you could get to make it easier. Have a friend help you with it, or just pray you can get it through the zoo route. It's Twin Blaze. I've wanted this item forever, chat. I have no luck with getting this. So why do people want to get this weapon? Fairly high ATP, so not super realistic for non-cast to get it before ultimate. Its special is Gafoli level 1 to 10. So remember what I said earlier. If you have any Gafoli out, if a bird or a Dwarfon or anything else charges at you and it hits the flame, it stops charging. So this is the only way for the cast hunters to deal with those kinds of enemies. Humar and Hunawhirl can technically get away with just any level Gafoi. I recommended probably at least level 8 or 9, so it's not ultra slow. But yeah, you could just spam this attack, and suddenly you're no longer just getting instantly deleted as a cast. And that is really nice. So this is something people still use even in Ultimate, just for the fact that it can stop charges, since charges do set damage, and set damage is pretty high. Also, for some reason, it gives 40 MST. Why does it give 40 MST? Why do the other wands that we've looked at give less than that? I don't know. I'm not gonna... Listen, chat. We're not gonna question certain things. We just accept them for what they are. I'm mostly just including these items to talk about them very briefly. I don't recommend the normal or hard mode runs for anything here. Yadamir is a pretty popular shield that you could technically acquire on hard mode and gives you 35 ATP on a shield. It's good. It also gives a 30% bonus to Foe for some reason. One item that's really funny that you could get on hard mode is something called Cannon Rouge. We haven't talked about bazooka-type weapons at all, because they're mostly in the higher difficulties. But essentially, it's a big explosion, it doesn't combo, and you can use this to hit enemies infinitely above or below you. So it's kind of like an alternative to Guilty Light, and in some scenarios, it's much better. So for multi-part bosses, this is probably the preferred thing to deal with them. It does a lot of damage. The one shot might end up doing like 300 damage to 6 or so boss parts, or up to 10 technically, which is a lot of damage if you do 300 times 10 to an enemy. You can also get Red Sword here. Where I would start recommending some of the runs maybe would be very hard mode. There's the... I'll call them the Umbrella series. We looked at some of them before, but I'm going to open them up so you can see them all next to each other. I always forget Bazooka is an actual weapon type, even though I have Cannon Rouge. Yeah, it basically doesn't really exist anywhere. So we're gonna briefly... We looked at Terrell's Parasol already, so we'll skip that. So a slightly weaker version of it is Madam's Umbrella, which gives Berserk. It's literally just worse Terrell's. It unfortunately doesn't buff Rest to Range, but it still buffs Shift to D-Band. And then Madam's buffs Anti and Rest to Range, so people will use it for that. The Spirit Special's okay, but for raw damage, Terrell's is just better. And also, because you're getting it from a quest, it can never come with hit percentage, so it's better just to farm Terrell's if you can. We mentioned 13 earlier. Technically, you can get it in very hard mode. This is why there's all these, like, asterisks to things that are normally ultimate mode only items. It buffs Slicer of Assassin, Disc of Liberator, and Disc of Brave Man by 50% ATP and adds 30 ATA, meaning 30% base accuracy, which is crazy. It's crazy, it's really broken, usable by all classes. If you like Slicers, Disc of Brave Man plus this equals GG. It's not uncommon for HuCast to use it since they don't have good ranged options. Fomarl is fantastic with her attack speed, she'll use it. Yukasil is really good with her animation, she'll use it. So, all really solid choices. If you'd like to form the Super Sword, which by the way, I don't think we talked about what the Super Sword was. So there's a lot of Vegetos. So many, chat. There are so many. Where's the one that I'm looking for is the question. Oh, don't do this to me. I know this is an item for this. Get out of here. Did they not link it there? Hold on, we're looking it up. So you gotta get all of the... I think it's the Book of Katana that's needed. Again, this quest is just ridiculous. Yeah, here it is. Go to full screen briefly. Chat can see what I'm looking at. So yeah, so you need all the Ejido series in order to form a Book of Katana. This is what I'm talking about with the Uber Rares. You have to get so many different books of katanas. So you have to get Musashi, Yamato, Asuka, Sage, Shishitsu. 5 different Ejidos. And then you need to get Kusanagi, Yadamir, Yasakagi, Magatama, Blackadoshi Damaru, and Redadoshi Damaru. If you're willing to put up with the most insane BS item ever to acquire, you could get 2 Kamui, which we did look at briefly before. Is it worth it? Absolutely not. What a terrible, terrible grind. But you know what? If people are really bored and they want to look up how to do it, if they want to spend like 80 to 90 hours getting absolutely terrible items to get a very disappointing endgame item, by all means. I feel like calling this one out. It had no right to be this obnoxious to acquire. Yeah, it's like, oh, you only need to get like 13, 14 different like 1 in 600 drops. It's fine. The only reason you would do it, other than to say that you went through this ridiculous quest chain in order to get it, is to say you could get Zalora on your HuCast. It's literally it. I'm not kidding, that's all it does. It's actually just strictly worse than alternatives. Because this one at least has Berserk, as an example. So shake your head, chat. Why bother? I will note that you can get Gurren and Shuren, which is another combo sword that firms Jizai. I don't think we looked at Gurren and Shuren. We looked at Sange and Yasha earlier. We'll look at Gurren briefly. Really high attack accuracy, but really high requirement. However, for a single target sword, that's pretty silly. If you do like the basic saber animation, try the katana animation, see if you like it. Let's see. So Gurren, you can get there. Technically, you can't get this into ultimate, but I'll talk about this because it goes into a component. This one is just extremely strong. It forms something called Jizai, which is a twin sword. This one is pretty good, and it's not hard to farm. What you would typically do is you would get a Gurren here, or... yeah, you would get a Gurren from the quests on very hard mode, potentially. And then you try to go to a difficulty where Shuren drops in order to get hit percentage. That way, when you combine the two, you can add hit percentage to Jizai. So what does this do? High ATP. If it comes with hit percentage, it comes with Hell, which is crazy. It's also affected by the Proof of Sword Saint we mentioned earlier, which gives 30 accuracy. So you can have unreduced Hell, and you can basically just one-shot everything in the game with V502 or its raw ATP. This is like a true endgame item, but you need a little bit of work for it. It has to come with a little bit of hit percentage, or you need Proof of Sword Saint to make it consistent. Because that way you could just hard attack or special attack all day long. Anyway, I think we managed to get out of this. We've talked about everything else. Oh no, we haven't talked about everything else. Never mind. Sorry, Chad. There's another item we'll talk because it's technically here. So you can't get this on prior to Ultimate, sadly, but I'll just mention little preempt Yashminikov. Very nice gun with sniper range. Smart Link you can get a couple of different ways. Technically, it's in some of the gamble lists, so I will talk about this one. Essentially, if you're playing as a hunter or a force, you can make it so that you get the reduced accuracy penalty that rangers innately have. So this is not equipable by rangers because it doesn't do anything. But just be aware, if you're a force or a hunter that loves to use slicer or pistol, and you feel like you're being cheated by the game at long distance shots, you actually are. You can get up to a 28 attack accuracy penalty on machine gun at max range, as an example, or as high as 70 attack penalty with anything with rifle range. So if you're wondering why you're missing your shots, chat, it's actually not you. Please use Smart Link. PSA, please use Smart Link. It's really good. Talked about Holy Ray. We're gonna skip through this. Okay, here's where we come into it, chat. Here's where the absolute nonsense occurs. Take any semblance of balance that you thought of for episode 4. So keep in mind, this is not even a custom quest. This is an existing quest. They did not create this for Ephinea. You can access it in Ephinea. But they decided, chat, for 1 Photon Crystal, which drops in boxes and everywhere in normal mode, and also drops from all but 1 rare enemy while playing on normal mode, the game could give you Master Raven on normal. What does Master Raven do? Why, look at this, chat. It's got a 380 attack, and it has a requirement of 150 accuracy, which is kind of high. It can't combo, but the first attack always triple shots. So for 1 single attack, you could just burst kill everything. This is considered a boss weapon on most characters. There are much better options for rangers, of course, or females. But, like, this gun is just something else. It also combines with something called the Last Swan, which is the female equivalency of Master Raven, and is one of my favorite guns in the game. What does it do? It's a handgun, so very quick shots, that pretends like it's a machine gun, so pistol range, but has triple shot on everything. Unlike Master Raven, it can combo, and it's got higher accuracy than most machine guns do. So if you're not using charge, really fantastic boss clear. This is one of the best boss clear weapons in the game for females. I'm just putting it out there. Like, if you have this gun, you could beat basically everything in the game, period. You don't really need anything else. There are weapons that are somewhat better, or like if you grind them out, they'll be much better than this gun. But the fact that you can get this on normal is like, I can test you to find a weapon as good as Last Swan on normal difficulty. I don't think it's possible. It's really, really insane. But anyway, these all form another weapon called Dual Bird. And as you can see, this is a max rarity gun. So get this, chat, it's a machine gun with 210 attack power. So this is literally 7 times better than most machine guns ever will be. So if you have relatively low accuracy, or not low accuracy, if you have relatively low ATP, this is great. The requirement to use it is insane. It's not realistic that you will use this on anything other than Ultimate. However, I want you to note this. It is a long-range weapon that the Hucasil can use. So, what a ridiculous endgame gun for the Hucasil. So good, chat. So good. So again, on normal, I want to remind you, these are all items you can get on normal. So we're no longer talking about ultimate only items. You can just make this. You can't necessarily use it, but you can make it. So if you play on normal, you can get something called Yunchang, 800 ATP. That is absolutely not going to happen prior to ultimate. Why is this used? Well, it's 350 ATP, which is okay, but more importantly is Berserk. And because it is Berserk, it's ridiculously good. On hard mode, some of the items rotate, so you get Shurin, looked at Yunchang, there's something else, the Blackhound Crisis. Which, you might notice, chat, sports a whopping 300 potential defense points from the quest. So this will make you almost literally unkillable in multiplayer if you get debanned, and especially unkillable if they ever debuff the enemy. The amount of damage you take is hilariously low, to the point where you are straight up immune to most enemies, even in Ultimate, if anybody has any level of Gelin. So really great for defense purposes. We talked about Yadamir, we talked about Sync Shield, we talked about Smart Link, we talked about Centurion ability. I'm going to talk about a joke weapon that is actually somewhat okay. And that is the Flapjack Flapper. Again, kind of a goofy weapon, but honestly, for just a random pickup on hard mode, it's not bad. I mean, it's a 400 ATP dagger. You're not going to go for this weapon specifically, but maybe if you're trying to get Master Raven or Centurion ability on hard mode, it's not a bad thing to get later. So we're going to skip ahead a little bit. We know about Vivian, which is that fantastic weapon for females. We're going to talk about Gracia, one of the best shields in the game. So look at the resistances on this. 150 defense, fantastic. 215 evade, fantastic. 30 plus resistances on some of the most damaging abilities in the game, and then relatively high dark and light resistance. So what a fantastic defensive item. If you combine this with the Blackhound Cuirass for casts, you're pretty much untouchable to everything in the game. It also gives a small bonus to Yashminikov. We briefly showed that earlier, but as a reminder, that is the sniper range machine gun. It grants it 10% attack speed, which is not really useful because you can get much easier bonuses. But with Gracia, it adds 30 accuracy to that machine gun, which is actually relevant, since that gun is used for its power attacks. And I believe, chat, we are at our final quest and discussion of this video. And that is the Claire's Deal 5. So I listed out some of the components that you could use. If you want to see those ridiculous combinations of items, by all means, take a look at what you need to get the Book of Katanas and stuff like here. It's all at the bottom. But anyway, chat, there's a reason we didn't cover Ultimate Mode. It's now like 4 in the morning here. So we're going to take a break from the item discussion. But I hope that was comprehensive enough, chat. We went through mags, we went through items, we went through material planning, we went through ridiculous quest unlocks. We went through basically everything. And there's still more to go. We haven't even touched the end game. We're going to be doing that in a separate video for sure. For people looking to just upgrade their characters, this is a good start. But just be aware that there are a lot of things you could take advantage of without necessarily going to Ultimate, and you could get Ultimate level items, including ones that require you to be an Ultimate to use. And I showed you many different ways you could get different mag kits. We talked about all the specials, we talked about glitches, we talked about basically everything. So while it might not have literally every possible run you could do, I think this is a good reference guide, and we'll be including this on our Discord as a file for people to look at. So if they want to just scroll through this without looking through everything else, it should be good. We covered a lot and yet so little. Yeah, we have to talk about some endgame builds for sure, and we'll be covering that in the next video. So, chat, are there any final thoughts on items before we wrap up here, since it's been a very, very long discussion? But I hope this covered everything you would ever want in terms of simple hunts to do with friends, if you're playing the game normally, or if you're looking to take advantage of quests. We showed you all the ridiculous items and why you could potentially skip what we saw earlier. If you're playing on GameCube, I think you have everything you need. If you're playing on Ephinea, but not necessarily with the ability to do Episode 4, you have ways to power up so that way you can handle it. We talked about everything you need for that. We talked about needing pistol. I guess there's one thing we didn't really talk about. I'll mention one more time for Episode 4. Gafoi is your friend. Use it on hunters if you can, even if you're not normally a caster, so that way you can deal with the zoos. Rangers, once you get Guilty Light or Photon Launcher, it makes it much easier, and then I recommend doing it, and that's how casts can deal with that difficulty. Twin Blaze, if you could unlock it, which is a bit more of a climb, that does allow the cast hunters to do it fairly easily. And also it's not bad for cast rangers either. So those are the kinds of items that make episode 4 really strong. One thing I think we also didn't mention is that you do need a mix of melee and ranged attacks for episode 4. So the reason why I was recommending you get things like the double sabers and a gun and things like that is because, well, you might be able to use the handgun on the zoo once it's stun locked, for example, or snipe some of the basic enemies. There are enemies like the satellite lizard, which will dodge all projectiles and requires something to melee them. And for Girdabulu, you might need things like demons or some ability to do technique damage. So I don't think most hunters and rangers will bother doing the underground portions of episode 4, but surface episode 4 is relatively doable. But for people looking for those items, I would say definitely go for it. I'm pretty sure you could get away with it. It's just that underground might prove to be a big issue without some kind of spell damage, because those enemy defense totals are really high, and they assume you have a force to kind of negate them with grants or to match the element that their claws are. I mean, I guess in theory, the game might expect you to use elemental weapons, but that's more of like a pure guessing game. I don't think that really makes a lot of sense to kind of come into. I mean, we'll put that as in a hypothetical. I guess if you had one weapon of every element, you could deal with the Girdabulu eventually in an efficient manner. Allegedly, but I don't recommend it still. So if you have things like those demons and devil specials, those will help with Dorphons or the Girdabulu, which are normally tougher targets. And actually, there's something missing, I just realized. Hold on. Hold on. Ooh, what event was it? Oh, that's gonna bother me. Oh, they listed here as one line. Okay, this is probably why I couldn't find it. Okay. So it's the hunter in the anniversary. I'm gonna go add that now before I forget to do that. So what can happen is we were talking about weapon specials before. And what can happen is you can select, I believe, the rarity type. I'm gonna make a note here. The hunter is not joke weapons only. Common weapons with hit chance and random special, or joke weapons only. There we go. Now we've corrected the notes. So the reason why this is important is because we talked about before some of the best in slots for the different characters. If you want truly endgame things and you manage to get a gold badge, which is possible, it's just not super likely on very hard mode. You can essentially get a 50 hit weapon like Hell, 50 hit ray gun with Hell or Demon / Devil, preferably Demon. You could get charge mech guns, you could get charge arm, which is a shotgun that does that. You can have a charged partisan if you want a partisan that does a lot of damage. Berserk slicers, all sorts of crazy things can come from this shop. And this is probably one of the better ways to just spend an easy gold badge to maybe get something useful. Because it's basically this or a photon crystal, and when you're at the end of the game, as you saw, it's not super hard to get photon crystals, where getting a 50 hit of a common item is much more annoying to get, since you could check the shops every now and then. They have a minimum level requirement before you start seeing the crazy high-end weapons with the hit percentage, since you'll see like lower end weapons because the game just wants you to be able to equip them, kind of thing. But yeah, I wanted to make sure we brought that up, because I totally forgot to mention that, and that's actually huge of how important that is. So now I can't think of anything else that I missed that is worth adding. But if chat was curious about all the random items that you could get here, there are many, many more. Yeah, I was talking about before, the flower cane gives 50 MST. I like the type ME wand a little more, but I use it for the same purpose. Here's all those uber rare items here, chat. So I cannot think of anything else. So let's go to the Let's Chat, I suppose. But minus the notes, where we wrap things up. Oops, I made chat go away for a second. So if we had to summarize the best way to kind of go through the game, I guess I'll do it as such. When you're playing a new character, I highly recommend you try to play during some special event, because almost all of them will get you ahead, even if you're not doing quests specifically to grind them. Once you have some basic Pauper carry rares, you could probably do most of episode 4 challenges on normal mode. Or if you reach very hard mode with, again, those Gafoes, launchers, etc., you could do most of the hard mode runs. So you could get a lot of experience still playing black paper deals, and yeah, that will just lead to some crazy things. Or if you don't want to use those weapons because the requirements are too high, you save those photon crystals to add hit percentage to things like Rast Assassin Arm. So that way you have a high hit weapon of your own, and then you just kind of cruise through. Right? So those are the kind of recommendations I would do leaning on episode 4. To me personally, attribute wall secret gear helps a lot, but isn't like mandatory. I do think going for those DPS carries makes a big difference. Obviously, if you're very new to the game, I don't expect you to be like the dodge master or figure out all the combos. So I think we've given enough defensive options, both through hunts and gambles and quests and gimmicks that I think cover basically everything that I can think of there. And while we didn't cover every possible weapon type, like there were a lot of like rare swords we didn't go over, my general rule of thumb, I guess if I had to go to sign off, would be if it has hit percentage, you'll probably use it. If you're using a basic weapon and not using it for its weapon special, rare weapons will probably just be a simple upgrade for you. But we tried to highlight the ones that are actual like damage changing or like run changing amounts of damage. And hopefully by taking a look at some of those and picking a few of those to carry you to the end of the difficulty, you'll be able to clear at least up to ultimate, and even honestly, depending on how much you go into episode 4, clear most of early ultimate, if not mid-game ultimate. And that's all I really have to say at this point. What a long video, chat. But I hope it's informative. So with that, chat, let's go ahead and say goodbye to YouTube. If you did watch to this point in the video or the VOD, I'd just like to say congratulations. It's going to be over 5 hours.
You're wide open!
Thank you, Lavros, for following. And when we do another video like this, it will be covering the endgame content. But for now, we're just covering your road to get there, and hopefully this has been your journey in the Pauper's Guide. Everything you would need to know is basically here, and hopefully this will carry you to the endgame of PSO.